Oh, why, hello, Internet. It's me, Shaun. Welcome to ZooBox. So I got a little off-the-cuff movie review for you today. I recently rewatched the 1980s movie, I think it's 88, maybe? 86, 88, something like that. Adrian Lyne directed. He also co-wrote it. Fatal Attraction, starring Glenn Close, and one Michael Douglas. One of the OG crazy lady erotic thrillers. Usually when you think of Fatal Attraction, you kind of, in your mind, you pair it with like Basic Instinct. At least I do. I think of them as like a double bill. I've seen Basic Instinct a bunch of times throughout my life, probably because of Paul Verhoeven and and Sharon Stone. And let's be real. I was gonna say, oh, Paul Verhoeven, and he does great stuff with genre, and this was his take on the erotic thriller, which is also true. And as I've gotten older and less of a hornball, as I've gotten a little bit older, that does hold true. But back in the day, it was definitely to see some Sharon Stone skin. Also, used to watch that movie Sliver. Have you guys ever see Sliver? It's one of the Baldwin brothers. Very erotic, very thrilling. Not really, actually. But anyways, Fatal Attraction. I've only seen this a few times. And it had been a long time. Probably close to 15 years since I'd actually sat down and watched Fatal Attraction. Because it's not like a favorite of mine. I'm not like a big erotic thriller stan or anything like that. But I do enjoy a good thriller, though. I have a real thing for kind of mediocre 90s thrillers. And 80s, I suppose you extend that out to the 80s. And I think Fatal Attraction kind of falls into that category because it's not like a great movie or anything, but it's incredibly entertaining. And a lot of that has to do with the performances. Glenn Close gives, I'm trying to remember, there's Alex Forrest. Is that the character's name? Miss Forrest is a character for the ages. I mean, that is something that is so incredible. And the line she walks in that, between being like kind of campy and over the top and kind of sincerely earnest and real and grounded, is impressive. It's incredible. And her performance kind of dictates the tone of the movie, because the movie kind of slightly shifts its tone into much like kind of more overtly campy by the time you get to the end. Spoiler alert if you don't know. She boils a rabbit in a pot. She shows up to the house and tries to kill the wife. Michael Douglas has to drown her in a bathtub. It's very dramatic. It's very over the top. It's very on the nose stuff. Because up until I would say kind of the end of the second act, it's a thriller. She seems threatening. She seems a little crazy, but you don't really realize the depths of her crazytude. I mean, I guess, the technical term for something like this is a crazy bitch. A real crazy bitch. Michael Douglas's character, Dan. Was he asking for it? Was he asking for it a little bit? I suppose so. In some ways, it's like a cautionary tale about infidelity. It's kind of got that old folklore-ness to it, Watch out, men. You think it's just a dalliance. But it's not. It could be Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction. That's who you could end up with. Some real crazy bitch. Although I have to say, the character of Michael Douglas, he's such a piece of shit. I have no sympathy for him, really, when I'm watching the movie. I have sympathy for his family. But I will say this, and even as a person that's, I've never cheated. I'm not into cheating. I don't think it's okay. I'm not sort of one of these postmodern married dudes. Oh, have you thought about open relationships? Nothing like that. I have to say, though, I still felt it down in my plums. I felt it down in my plums, that anxiety, that uneasiness. And you can't kind of help but empathize with him a little bit, just as a guy in general. I've known some crazy broads in my day. I've some borderline personality psychos that I didn't know were that at the time. And there's enough of a similarity there that I suppose I could make a connection to one degree or another. But the casualness in which Michael Douglas's character engages in infidelity kind of makes you think that it's something that maybe he does semi-regularly, or at least this is not his first time. It's just the first time he's gotten caught, because he has, kind of an idyllic life. A beautiful wife who's kind of doddering and smart and interesting, and a kid, although the kid is weird. The thing that they do with the kid in this is weird. I'm sure it's some sort of bourgeois hipster bullshit of these kind of yuppies that made this movie, because Adrian Lyne is definitely a yuppie. He makes movies for yuppies. And they have this kind of genderless thing with her, even all the way back in the 80s, that was just distracting. Because it's a little girl, but they have her kind of dressed up like a little boy to one degree or another, and it's just distracting. That's all. Nothing else to really remark on it. It was just kind of a progressive thing to be progressive. And even in the 80s, doing some weird shit with kids and gender. I guess it was the hip thing to do. They'd probably read some Dr. Ruth book or something. Oh, she wrote about sex, though, didn't she? Well, you know how these coomers are. Always bringing kids into it eventually. But anyways, you know what I mean. It's like, it's a very entertaining movie. I don't really have a ton to say about it, like, to remark upon. It's really just that Glenn Close performance, like, really makes it into something special. It elevates the material. It elevates everything about it. Because the direction, like, Adrian Lyne, not a bad director by any stretch of the imagination. This is in his wheelhouse. And it's very serviceable in that way. It's very serviceable in that way. I would say, if I would say to give any credit to his direction, is just kind of the right casting and letting his actors kind of go for it. I'm sure that there's very different versions of this movie, like, that you could cut with, like, kind of the different takes of Glenn Close's. And she must have had an incredible amount of trust in the director to allow herself to kind of be seen in that way. It's hard not to be self-conscious, even though, we all know it's fiction, it's a movie. Man, when somebody makes an impression, when an actor makes an impression on you, sometimes it can stick. I think Glenn Close even had kind of trouble shaking that character off for a while, subsequently, honestly. I was trying to remember. I was like, I've never really followed Glenn Close's career, but, for people my age, it's like when she was in the 101 Dalmatians movie. That's kind of like where we would know her from more than her broader work, I suppose. I mean, she's always solid, though. I've always enjoyed Glenn Close. She always does a good job in whatever she's in. She always brings it. But not as hard as she brings it in Fatal Attraction. My God. My God. I'm serious. I was just like, I got to watch it with my wife, too, who I don't think had ever seen it, or at least hadn't seen it in so long. It might as well have been. She'd never seen it. And she was also having kind of the same reactions, but in a real visceral way. Because like I said, even though it's kind of over the top and campy at points, at times, Glenn Close really makes it believable. She grounds it in something that feels relatable and tangible. Like, you do feel bad for her to one degree or another. Like, if your empathy gets activated for anybody, there's a part of the movie where it's definitely, you're a little bit on her side. And that's, again, credit to Adrian Lyne to kind of threading that needle, finding that balance between where your empathy as an audience lies. Because, we think of Michael Douglas as the protagonist, so we just kind of assume that he's the good guy, like we're on his side. Not always the case. Not always the case. But yeah. Entertaining. Very entertaining movie. If you haven't watched it in a while and you're in the mood for something a little trashy, just like a little trashy though. It's like, this is the kind of movie, this is not so too trashy that I wouldn't watch with my mom. I would watch Fatal Attraction with my mom. It'd be a little uncomfortable. Maybe briefly. But it's not that bad. It's pretty tame. By modern standards, it's a very tame movie. Even like the spicy, the hot sex scenes, oh, they're fucking on the counter. The passion is alive. I was watching some of the supplements on the disc, and that's something the director remarked on. He's like, wow. And I was trying to think of where would be the sexiest place to do it. He's like, I remember one time I had sex in the kitchen, and there's plates clanking and cupboards shaking and the faucet getting turned on. It was wild. It was very erotic. Life, or art imitates life. There we go. I got it out. Anyways, yeah, I think that's going to do it for this, though. Just kind of needed to record something. So I did it. Talked about Fatal Attraction. you should watch it. It's worth revisiting. It's a fun movie. It's not a great movie. It's a fun movie. Okay? They're allowed to be fun sometimes too. Sometimes that's all it needs to be. Shut up.